Hello, this week on Mastering Dungeons, we don't have Shawn, and actually we don't have me either. This is but an illusion. I am away and Shawn is super busy, so we are going to share with you a recording we did back in October of this year at Gamehole Con with Mike Shea and Mike Mearls discussing the beautiful mess of 5e. This was a conversation, a panel about 5th edition's various third-party providers, the different iterations of 5th edition, and what it means to work in a very large ecosystem where 5e has so much to it that it can be messy. It's a really fun recording. I really enjoy it. Mike Shea has shared it. In fact, said, hey, if anybody wants to share it, feel free. He posted on his channel. And so now we're going to share it this week while I'm away. Also this week, we are going to share with you, you'll see on our channel, a video appear from my Alpha Stream channel, which I recorded with Scott Fitzgerald Gray earlier in the year, about how to make a book. And we thought that would be something neat to kind of cross the streams and post on here as well. So you'll be able to see that video as well this week. Hopefully that bides your time. And then we will be back with all the news, the views, the reviews, the stuff. Apparently Shawn's job is hard. Who knew? Anyway, enjoy the panel.
All right, so this is our panel on the beautiful mess of 5e. And I thought we'd start off by kind of introducing ourselves and what our role is with 5e kind of stuff. Shawn?
Okay, my name's Shawn Merwin. I am currently the managing editor and game designer at Ghostfire Gaming. I have done freelance and not just 5th edition, but 3rd edition, 4th edition, and various other games over the years.
So I'm Mike Shea. I write for Sly Flourish. I wrote Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master, and I've written several different 5e supplements.
So I'm Mike Mearls, and there's a chance if something in D&D 5e you really hate, that I wrote it while sitting on a recliner that I have since been forced to throw out by my wife, who actually has taste, in our living room. So,
did you create the shield spell?
Yes, I did. I probably wrote it. Just a lot of it.
Counter spell.
Because I'm a Magic player.
Oh no!
And I'm a blue player. I love playing blue.
So we have it now. That it is an actual blue deck
It
spell.
turns out if it doesn't rely on having 2 islands open, it's a bit oppressive. So,
Yes.
Hello, everybody. My name is Teos Abadia. Nice to see so many cool people out there. Hi. I work on a number of things. I primarily worked in organized play, and then with fine folks like really everybody here at some point, which is amazing. And now I'm actually helping, not to change topics, but I'm helping MCDM create a huge mega adventure for Draw Steel. So that is my current fun.
Awesome. So I have kind of a philosophy that I'm going to throw out there, and I don't even know if the people on the panel agree with this philosophy. So I'll throw it out, and then what I'd first like to know is that I'm going to say this thing: is it true? So my philosophy is that after the OGL crisis that happened a couple of years ago, when the 5.1 system reference document, which was the core document released back in 2016, put 5e rules into the Creative Commons, that the whole of 5e forked into something new. And where originally 5e meant the 5th edition of Dungeons & Dragons, and the SRD was that rule set put together, now 5e is its own open platform that isn't owned by any one company. And now we have at least 4 Creative Commons released system reference documents, that, including one that is completely independent from the others, that have this, and we'll talk about compatible, but have a compatible rule set that any publisher can write for, that any game system can be built off of, that any adventures can be written for, monsters, spells, everything can be built on, that isn't controlled by any one company. Do we agree with that? I'll start with Teos. We went the other way. That's strictly the reason.
So, I mean, you and I love talking about this.
I know, right?
So I am of the opinion, perhaps contrarian opinion, that a game is not like we like to say that Peter Adkison saved D&D, and I'm like, okay. I mean, I'm thankful. Like, it's cool that he bought the company and kept it going. Like, I'm very appreciative for a lot of reasons, but not because I think he saved AD&D. It was always on my shelf. I always could have played it. And the reason we're not all here playing AD&D, I mean, some of you are. Like, how many people are playing AD&D right now? Cool. So both of you are playing Peter Atkinson, but the majority of people are playing whatever's full of energy at the time, right? And I think that always moves forward. And so it's less about the preservation or it's the current energy. And so literally all that has to happen is they make 6E, and we'll all start shifting to have a different conversation unless we hate it. And then we'll wait till 70 and we'll do the same thing and so on. And I'm really excited for 8E, which I hear is going to be great.
Yeah, I think in some ways it just reflects a truth. When I worked on D&D, the number of people playing D&D or role-playing games was pretty consistent and pretty consistently growing. You're just always adding more people faster than the rate which people are dying, hopefully. And so the trick is like, what games are people buying? I mean, and those are two very different questions, because people can be really into something. So I'll give you, this is one of the examples I love to use. How many people watched NFL football last weekend? Okay, how many people bought the official NFL rule book in the past week? Probably, I'm sure maybe somebody did.
Is there one?
But I'm sure there is. I mean, but and there are a lot of, and so that's one of the things that is interesting about the game is it is very much I think what we're seeing is just a reflection of the reality that it's a folk game. And really, it's this sort of, as long as there's a shared language between people. Like, I ran a game this morning where some people were using 2014 characters. One person was running a character from a Ghostfire gaming supplement, and someone else was running a 2024 character. And it worked because you have a human at the table managing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If you
I
think
will note that the NFL rules are available free online.
Are they under a Creative Commons license? Can we all make our own folk football? Still not an open license, but still. Yeah.
if you
Can't
think
make your own football.
Right.
tell the XFL then.
Yeah. It's like,
Football, I mean, that was kind of...
If you think 5th edition is a mess, have you ever met AD&D?
right.
So there's a mess in terms of legalese, and then there's a mess in terms of the actual design. And as long as the design is solid enough to support everything else that's going around it, then it's beautiful and it's not a mess. The mess is when you, as the DM, have to make up your own rules and then try to play with someone else. So like Mike says, 3 different rule sets, but they're all working together pretty well. So that's where I'm coming from, not legally, not business-wise, but in terms of, do the rules hold up?
Yeah, and my thought about the mess isn't so much the legal side of what we're able to do, because right now it's like, it feels like we can do whatever we want, right? Like, especially when it comes to 5e, we can do a whole lot, right? Like, once it's under a creative, that license is wide open. All we have to do is put a sentence or two in a product, and you can even pick which one, right? So you can pick different ones and put your sentence in, and then kind of do it. And we've seen entire other D&D-like systems, like Old School Essentials, that is using, in their case, they're actually using, I think, the 3.5 SRD under the OGL, but they use the OGL to build a 1E compatible version of D&D. So a lot of it was just getting I remember during the OGL, I think I could talk about this, during the OGL thing, you and I shared an email about back and forth. I was like, just get the names out there. Yeah. Like, we don't even need the rules, but if we just know that we're not going to get sued for using the term magic missile, that's good enough, right? Like, we can go a lot more, and we've definitely gone further than that. But the mess, which I refer to as the beautiful mess, is this idea that now we have, I mean, in my case, literally a one game, 4 separate versions of 5e from 3 different companies that are all getting mashed together. Yeah. And we literally well, which, I cast Counterspell. Well, which version are you playing, right? Like, which one of the 4 Counterspells are you running? Because they're different if we're using different ones. And that's where things get messy. And we all laugh and we all joke about it. And that's the beautiful part, is like, it really, in the end, it's a bunch of people around the table playing a game. It doesn't matter too much.
Yeah, I agree. And the spirit of the game, in some ways, going back to AD&D, it's the spirit of the game that catches people's attention. Yeah. And if we can get past the little bits of rules friction that we have, Counterspell, okay, well, is it a saving throw? Is it a spell check? Is it this or that? Who cares?
Yeah.
Roll the d20.
Yeah.
Unless you roll a 10, I'm going to say yes or no. Right? and then we'll move forward.
Yeah. And even like within one system, you're saying AD&D has this mess, right? Like, even one system when there wasn't a bunch of different ones. Within one system, we had all this messy stuff. And just looking at like D&D 2024, and since we're picking on Counterspell because it's your fault, that, you know, the number of arguments I have about...
This is a better panel. Let's pick the
better than the one you had in your head. Oh yeah, and just let's talk about Shield, right? So I'm just glad I got confirmation that the actual design of Counterspell was based on blue deck magic, and that's not just an insult I use; it's actual truth, right?
Blue light for life. That's me. I have control. You're not having fun, son. We're gonna play some magic.
I'll tell you about the submarine. My friend in the submarine philosophy, right? That when I have a friend who's was a submarine officer, and he said when you go on the submarine and you close the hatch, there's a finite amount of fun. So the only way you're going to get more fun is take it from someone else.
Exactly.
That's blue deck magic.
That's why you play.
Right? Like you're not. The only way I'm going to have fun with my blue deck is make sure that person's not having fun.
That's how you play Magic. You say it's my turn. I pass your turn. I'll untap my islands first. No, what do you want to do?
So, but like on the, not picking on Counterspell, but even within 5e, the number of times I have players who are like, I have an Archmage and he's casting 3 arcane bolts. And the guy's like, I'm going to counterspell that. And you're like, well, they're not really spells, right? They're kind of ranged attacks that look magical, but they're not spells. And they're like, how is that not a spell?
So, now do we want to just like leave it because I have thoughts about that?
Sure, bring it. Yeah.
So this is where things get
part of the mess, right?
It's part of the mess. What's really interesting to me. So one of my things that I teach game design at the University of Washington. And I think one of my skills I've developed over the years is like forensic game design. Like if you show me, one of the things I love to do is my students will work in a project and they'll present their progress and I'll have them talk about it and I'll say, okay, none of you are talking to each other. You are like doing all this work and you're working on this and you're working on this and you're working on that and no one's ever talking. You guys are meeting 0 times per week. So start meeting. Like, I don't even need to have them tell me like, oh, we're not meeting. Like, I know that because I can look at a game design and be like, I know how this got made because I've been doing it for 30 years. So one of the things I found fascinating is like, there is a solve for that in 2024 D&D. It's in there. They have the action types. It's so weird to see something like that. And like, all they had to do was say, arcane bolts, it's a magic action. And then Counterspell just has to say, someone takes a magic action, you use Counterspell and counter it. And part of that's my trading card game side too, like templating and stuff. Like, that's what I think is really fascinating is I feel like there's a lot of stuff like that in 2024 where it almost feels like they were getting feedback and trying to implement it, but like didn't quite connect all the dots to make it actually fully function. So that's what I think is also interesting too. And I see that sometimes with like when you have narrative breaking down like that, someone's using something that's clearly magical. I am doing something that feels like it should work. And it doesn't. Like that to me is like a real fail state for a TTRPG where it's like, whoa, like this just makes no sense.
It gets killed. Yeah.
I mean, and that's partly this, let's go out again. That's partly the mess of being so successful that your edition has lasted longer than I'd even expected to, which is also Mike's fault. So successful, it kept going. Almost got a spit take. But it's so, it's like it wouldn't have been a problem if it had just died like editions normally do. But it was so good, it kept going and had to become another one.
And this is when you said, eventually they're going to make a 6th and we're all going to move to that. And I always wanted, I didn't do it at the time, but I put in all, right? And it's like, there were 2 people still playing AD&D. That's not all, right? There's some people that are out there. And I do feel like, and we had this conversation before. I'm sure the 3 of us had this conversation before about the biggest competitor to D&D 2024 is going to be D&D 2014.
Yeah.
Right. There's going to be a lot of people that are still playing the old version of the game.
Oh, actually, I'm curious. How many people here who've played D&D in the past 6 months have only played D&D 2024?
The past 6 months?
Yeah, say 6 months.
I don't count. I only done it once. It was
okay.
It was the long set. So.
But that's like a third of the room, right? Half the room. Like it's just interesting. Even we're kind of
how many in the last 6 months have been playing D&D 2014? Yeah. So
that tracks.
Your numbers.
Yeah. And then we're at a year, right?
Oh yeah, we're over a year.
We just crossed a year for the Player's Handbook release. So and then we know okay, but in my case, my campaigns last longer than a year. So I have 3 5e campaigns. One of which I'm using 2024 monsters, but they're using 2014 characters because I like the 2024 monsters more and they hit harder and I get to throw the thread on them. The other one is a mix. but I haven't even gotten to the point where I've started a new campaign.
Yeah.
And 2024 was fully out, right? Like I haven't hit that point yet. So there could be this slower progression, but I still think that ratio, like it'll be interesting. We'll do this again in a couple of years and we'll see what's that percentage look like of this perfect representative sample that we have here.
But it's been fascinating because you would think like you could argue either way. That's like, well, this is a really hardcore audience, so you'd expect more people to pick it up. Right. But what's been fascinating is when I ran a 2024 campaign last year, and some of my players used it. One of the players who didn't was one of my players who's like super system genius guy, like has designed TCGs. And he was like, I don't want to spend the time optimizing my 2024 character, so I'll optimize the 2014 character because I know that system. And I thought that was really interesting. Like, here's someone you'd expect would pick it up and want to chew through it. But it's like, just don't want to. And like, that's just so, but I think the reactions are just all over the place. And I think that might be part of the mess, as I don't think there's a clear narrative of like why you like it or dislike it. I think it's all kind of all over the place.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and again, this, I have that, we have a call every week where like we all hang out and yell at each other for an hour and it's great. And one of the things that came up was like we were kind of doing predictions on what we thought would happen. And I was saying like there's really, grossly like 4 things that could happen when D&D 2024 gets released. It could completely bomb, right? It could be, it's not as good as what 2014 was. It could be, it's better in some ways, not as bad in other ways. Or it could completely overtake the area. And I was like, and it felt like you're going to have a perfect sort of bell curve on the likelihood of those situations. And I think it kind of hit that, better in some ways, not as good than others. And I think we pick up on that when we're thinking about what system we have. But that's just talking systems.
Yeah.
And then you get into third-party supplements that we've got. And there are hundreds of third-party supplements. And Ghostfire has tons of them. And you've now been at Ghostfire, both designing stuff for 2014 and designing stuff for 2024.
Sure.
How has that general, from a design and development strategy, how has that changed as the new version, the new update? I don't know what you would call it.
Well, from the business side, it's the business people tell me what I'm doing.
Right.
They're like, we think we can sell this many, so we're doing this.
Right.
And it was 2024.
And D&D Beyond
And
requires 20.
That's, yeah.
Right.
Oh,
D&D.
God, there's so many questions I want to ask. But would they let you do a D&D 2014 version?
I have no idea.
Yeah, right.
Like I was Manning.
I know. I'm just
CEO.
Right.
So
It's more of a rhetorical question. Like, well, I wonder if they would let you do a 2014 one.
But what that has led me to have to do is update our 2014 stuff to 2024. So that's been my life for the last year and 2 hours.
Right.
And it's great. It's fun to see that transition. It's fun to see where things are going. And like Mike teaches a class in game design, I teach a class on writing for role-playing games. So I was happily going along using the same 2014 rules. And then last year, my students, some of whom are gamers and some are not, come into class, and I can't just say, okay, here's the D&D rules. Now I have to be like, okay, how many people play 2024? How many people play 2014? How many people don't know what D&D is? And I have to figure that out and move to a new system.
Do they come in and say, Shawn, how do the hide rules work in 2024 D&D? Could you explain that? Right. Yeah. So I mean, and that also kind of gets into the mess of it, which I think was kind of by design. And one of the things we want to talk to you about is the modularity of 5e from the beginning.
Yeah.
And, all the wonderful articles that you wrote on dnd.wizards.com that are now no longer there. What, you talked about the modular design of 5e. Can you talk a little bit about that now?
Yeah. So one of the things so when we started designing 5e, our assumption was we had a very splintered audience that had lots of different interests. And so we started by saying, hey, it's going to be very modular in the sense you'll have 3 different ways to play a fighter. What we found in playtest was it was much more of a monoculture than we expected, that people kind of wanted the same thing. So we didn't need to present the game and it's very there's 3 fighters out of the gate, because people were happy with basically 1 fighter chassis. I'm gonna whatever. This is my intent with the design, because I was a software guy. I worked at a .com, which has been great with the AI bubble. I'm like, that's part of the last bubble, so I can kind of want. Because I worked at a startup.
Buying gold.
Yeah, exactly. So the one of the things that's interesting about how we try to design the system
is the modularity that is there that was meant to support the different ways you can play was this idea that each piece of the system has as few interdependencies with other pieces. So when we shipped 5e, you might notice there was like hit dice that you would use after a long rest, and nothing else in the game touched them. And that was by design, because like one of the modular elements was you may or may not have hit dice in the game. Like we in theory could do like a science fiction game that would have a very different resource curve and approach to rest that just wouldn't have hit dice in it. Your class just would not give you hit dice because that's just not how we thought that game would work. There are a lot of things like that where the way you can think of it is each piece of the game is handing off data to other pieces of the game. And what you want to make sure is that within each piece, if it needs data, there's either a default case, like, hey, if you don't have a value for this, treat it as 10 or 1 or whatever, or like it isn't referred to outside of its domain. So hit dice are only talked about in terms of resting, because then we can give you an alternate resting system that doesn't use them. And they appear in the character classes, because the character classes are kind of a nexus, like they're broadcasting data to every single piece of the system, so they kind of need to be code complete.
Nerd.
But yeah. I could get some spreadsheets. So that was the idea behind it. And that's why it's interesting. Like, so my brain picks up on things like, oh, yeah, these action types. I'm reading the player's handbook. Oh, cool. You're going to keyword everything with an action type. So now we can clean up all of the messes like counterspell. That it's not there, right? So it's like, oh, this is kind of awkward, right? Like we sometimes use the action types and sometimes don't. And so that was one of the things you look at 5e and its modularity of how we wanted to build it. And then that extended over to things like the math behind the game. Because the math, the way you can think of it is you have all these subsystems that have content that they're that functions within them, like a monster, right? A creature has so many hit points. In the current 5e system, you determine a creature's hit points by taking its hit die, multiplying that hit die by the average value of the die, and multiplying the number of hit dice by its con, right? There is a way to do it. But you don't need to do it that way. You could do another monster that just has 50 hit points. Just has hit points 50. Because since nothing in the game refers to hit dice except resting, there's no spells that say you lose hit dice, or like, oh, this depends on the creature's hit dice. That's why we tried to avoid challenge rating. Now, we weren't quite as successful with that. So the idea was to avoid using challenge rating, because maybe at some point we'd want to do another way to measure creatures. So my spell is not making a function call like, hey, I need to know this target's challenge rating. Well, it might not have one. Because challenge rating is like the system that sits outside of gameplay. It's a measurement you're making on the creature. It's like asking how tall is the creature? Is it 5'2" or 5'4"? Like it can exist in the game, but it's not something you want necessarily your rules referring to, because you don't want to have to specify the height in feet and inches of every creature you design, things like that. So that's what I find really fascinating. That's something I'm doing a lot of, like the work I'm doing now is kind of focused on these alternate systems, knowing that like I can run a monster without hit dice. I can run a monster that has like doesn't have skills because the game doesn't assume skills. It just needs to know the modifier. Stuff like that. And I think that is something where I'm curious to see if that starts to evolve. Like if designers start to go further and further afield, like knowing how compatible the game could be without carrying a lot of mechanics over because of the way they're siloed off. But obviously, if you're like talking about D&D Beyond, it's very different because then you have to be very rigidly in their system.
And what's Mike's talking about this hit die thing, like it's not associated with anything else. So then we get third-party products where like we're going to use hit dice to power spells, which is cool, which is fun, but then it ignores that. So now I have a tiny creature that's CR 30 that has 7,000 D4 hit dice, and I'm going to give it this spell where it can roll all its hit dice. Right, and so those things are sort of lost in the translation unless you are able to dig down and understand that baseline thing. And that's where the mess becomes less beautiful.
Yeah.
When you start losing that game design thread.
The interesting thing, there's that where this all ends up is in the hands of the game master.
Yep.
Right. And so the game master is the one who will have to sit there and say, oh, I've got all of these supplements that I brought in, and I got this one, and I've got this, the CR30 Fairy Queen Barbarian who's got 7,000 D4 hit points, and this one spell over here that lets you convert your hit dice into an amount of damage that you do on each attack roll, which normally would be bounded, but is not bounded by this one. And the GM go, yeah, we're not doing that. Or I'm going to change this, right? And we've been doing that forever.
Right.
If you are a game designer, you should go out and read. You can just search for the blog post "Infinite Oregano," and it pretends that gamers are looking at cookbooks and breaking them. And so it's things like, wait a minute, it says add oregano. It doesn't say how much oregano. I can add infinite oregano. Right. And it's just all these comments on a fake cooking book. But it's that thing you need to understand, that players will think this way.
Right.
Nobody goes, can I eat this meal? They're just like, I can add infinite oregano. And that's what they'll do with infinite hit dice or whatever, right? Like just.
And it's interesting. So like I was running with this is a few years ago, I was running with the D&D 2014 Player's Handbook. I love to limit the source books that we use in a campaign because I think it like tailor builds a campaign around a particular feeling. So I was like, okay, we're playing in this campaign world from this publisher, and we're going to use their player option book that fits that same group, and the Player's Handbook is the core book. But we're not using Xanathar's or Tasha's. We're going to be using this one instead. But I'm having read it, I said, one of the, like, on session 0 was, I don't really know what's in here. And there could be some weird effects, both good and bad. Uh-huh. If we hit one of these on either your side or my side, let's have a conversation about it and figure out a way to make it work. And in their case, most of the subclasses were underpowered. And I had a player who, like, they picked a subclass and, like, I love the flavor, but this sucks. And I was like, well, what would make it cool? Well, it'd be cooler if that was a bonus action instead of an action. I'm like, done, right? Now it's a bonus action. So that's where I think the beautiful mess ends up manifesting. Mm-hmm. And I think the reality is it's been there this whole time, right? Like I had, when I was just using Wizards of the Coast D&D 5e products, I still had to have that conversation, right? Like I had no Twilight clerics, no Peace clerics, right? Like I had to put those in there. Like, those are official sources, right? And, but they didn't work for me, right?
We had Treant Monk who you've worked with on Mastering Dungeons. And we asked Chris, when you are reviewing these subclasses, like, do you want this to be like the coolest subclass ever? And his answer was no. Because then we have to choose that. Yeah, right. And you don't want...
It eliminates every other choice.
The only choice. Like when it's only a Twilight Cleric and only a, this type of Ranger and then the class is in trouble. You want there to be different kind of interest levels. Even the optimizer can go, well, I could be one of these 4 things and it'd be just fine. Right?
Yeah. And again, like, the Light Cleric in D&D 2014, I was like, it's a perfect except for Fireball. Right. And it's because why? Well, Fireball, again, I think you wrote, is way out of bounds of a 3rd level spell.
But it's not.
But you said it was. I read the article.
Wrong, because now I went through it, and it's actually right on. This is another, but you talk about the math. Sorry, just to rewind a little bit, math. There are mathematical mistakes in the game that have just been carried forward. It's interesting that, well, how would you fix it? So when you actually look at, if you actually look at the damage output of Fireball, and this is such a thing about D&D, it's so cultural. It is such like the vibes. 8d6 damage. Oh, that's really outrageous. That's 28 damage. But then when you look at, you get that spell at 5th level. If you actually plot out this by CR, the creatures are going to be fighting at 5th level, 28 hit points is actually not much damage. Because if it's a boss fight, it's worse than what the fighter's like dishing out. If it's minions, like you have to go pretty like down to like CR1 to start hitting creatures that will die even if they succeed the saving throw. So there is this interesting thing where when you look at both the damage of Fireball and then especially the way spells scale their damage, they scale way too slowly. But it felt too powerful. Like,
I mean, everyone gets it. Like every player I know, I've never heard anybody says, I don't think I'm going to take Fireball. I'm going to go with Alarm, right? Right? Like
everyone gets it. But when you look at when you math out the actual damage output and you compare it to so Fireball does 28 damage to a bunch of creatures. So part of it is...
You're also, in the math, you're supposed to double it, right? To generally
figure it out. That was the problem because the actual damage
a lot of
AoEs, we way overrated it. I these days multiplied the base damage by 70%. To then figure out, based on actual play, how much it's actually worth. Because there is, I'm going to try not to make this too long of a tangent. One of the challenges of D&D is there is no, strategy behind it. So typically, if you look at games like Magic or any competitive game, there's a core thing you're trying to do. In Magic, I'm trying to build my engine that guarantees I win while trying to disrupt your ability to build your engine. Or I just build my engine faster. So I might play a super fast aggro deck, just try to stop me. I'm playing lots of goblins, I'm going to overrun you. Or I'm going to play a control deck and I'm counterspelling your stuff, so then you run out of gas and then I hit my end game. D&D, we don't have a composite of like, how should you fight monsters? Like, if you played AD&D and you read like Dragon Magazine, they'd say things like, okay, when you're in the dungeon, here's how you do things, right? Like, bring a 10-foot pole and poke ahead.
5 mules.
5 mules, right? Yeah, right. You know what you get, right?
A bunch of hirelings that go in ahead of you. Yeah.
But when you think of D&D 5th edition, there is no like, well, how are you supposed to fight monsters? And I think that's actually a big flaw. Because what I would say is, well, the way you're supposed to fight monsters is you want to win the action economy fight by focus firing and killing as many monsters as possible. So doing 28 damage to everything in the encounter is actually a bad move. You'd rather control spell shut down one thing.
Yeah.
Because now the
hypnotic pattern is way worse than fireball.
Yes, exactly. Because I want to drop your damage per round from the encounter. So if I just bloody everybody, the encounter's still doing the same amount of damage. But if I shut down just one creature, now that incoming damage is down. So there is this interesting argument. And so what my math is, I think not only is that damage is actually on par for a spell, and it should probably go up by 2d6 for each like level you boost it up. But the problem was, I remember this vividly. We talked about, so magic missile, you get 3 darts. That's awesome. So if you upcast it, you get 1 extra dart. It's like, no, you should be getting 3 extra darts because that'll actually keep you on schedule.
No one likes rolling that many d4s.
Well, it just looks broken. It's like 6 darts. That's madness. You didn't get that to like 15 level in AD&D, right? And that's a lot of like the cultural baggage. But when you math it out, you see a very different reality emerge.
I want to go back to the idea of modularity. There's a couple things, but I want to ask Shawn about it. So you've had a number of different player guides and campaign books, and they have had modular components that you have added to these. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about a couple of them? What was sort of, when you were looking at the core design of 5e and thinking about how to put these on top, what was going to...
When I joined Ghostfire Gaming, they had already put out their campaign guide, and they were doing a player book. So I got to come in at the end of that process to sort of develop the rules. And the big thing that, they were big on Gothic horror, Grimm's fairy tales gone horribly wrong. And so they wanted vampires, they wanted werewolves, but they wanted you to be able to play that. So the challenge was to make it something that added to the story, but did not become its own subclass, did not become its own class. And a lot of the design was already done, so I tweaked it, but it was very powerful to be able to do that. So now with the 2024 rules, we got to redesign all of them. And the first thing I did was not make it its own subclass. And the players rebel. They
want a subclass.
They want more power, right?
Yeah.
They want to stack the abilities rather than have it be another option. I understand as a player why you would want that. I understand as a game master why you don't want that. What the action economy can do is allow you, instead of using this one power to double something that you could do, is you have a choice of 2 things, both good in certain situations. So it doesn't become analysis paralysis. It's, I need to damage 6 monsters, so I'll use this. I need to damage this one monster a lot, I will use this.
So kind of going wide instead of deep.
Exactly. So that's what I tried to do as we moved into 2024.
Then with Aurora,
yes,
you had some interesting takes on that, like new ways to add character options that was kind of outside of the standard. What were those?
Yeah, the conceit for the world of Aurora was there are no species. Yeah. Everything is its own unique creature. And how do you do that? You take all of the traits that a normal species would have, and you let people pick them. Mm-hmm. And can you get some wild and crazy power? Yes. But you also can tell great stories, and you can create the character you actually want. So 5th edition was a good way to look at how species are done. Let's extract everything. Let's rebuild it, put it together, and come up with a system where you can pick and choose as you go.
And did you see areas where that broke down, or did you see areas where that broke down if it was mixed with other things?
I didn't really.
Do we have the barbarian fairy with the 4,000 d4?
No. I didn't worry about other rule sets.
Yeah.
We're going to be using.
We're doing this one.
The SRD 5.2.1.
Yeah.
Here we go, and so that's what I use.
And one thing that's been, I think, successful for 5th edition is that it built in barriers that didn't exist in, say, 3rd edition, where you ended up with your pun builds and things like that. You're just obscene, unbelievable.
Oh, there's still some obscene builds.
Or 4th edition, right? I push you, 20 squares and knock you prone, and if you approach me, I'll knock you prone again, right?
The zigzag, right? Zigzag into a wall.
Can you do that? You're like, all the time. It's like, okay, thanks for building that character. Right? Like, there's a lot less in fifth edition that allows for that. Thank you. And so therefore, the third party stuff also is a little safer with how it relates to the system, which is a nice feature of 5e.
Yeah, I'd like to kind of talk a little bit about compatibility now, right? Because we now have these. So I think compatibility and modularity are really tied closely together. And so I have a game now that's 18th level. It's going to 20th level, and we've been running Level Up Advanced 5. We started with Level Up Advanced 5e by EN World Publishing. Then I had a couple of players who were like, the advanced part of this is driving me a little bananas. There's a lot of nitpicky stuff in here that seems like I'm spending a lot of time with, so that's not really changing a lot. So I'd like to switch. And other people are like, no, I love it. I want to keep running with those classes. So we have 3 people that stayed with it. We have, and then 3 that switched over. And one of those stuck to D&D 2014, and then 2 others switched to D&D 2024, and we've been running all of that at the same table and watching all of it go. But what's interesting, and then I was like, yeah, that's great, but also I really like this Tales of the Valiant thing. Right, I love the luck system. Right, as soon as I read the luck system from Tales of the Valiant within the first Black Flag, I'm like, oh, I'm done with advantage, or I'm done with inspiration. Right, like this is it. This is so much nicer. For anybody that's not aware of the luck system from Tales of the Valiant, anytime you miss an attack roll or a saving throw, you get 1 luck point. You can have up to 5. You can trade them in 1 time per round to either add +1 to a roll, or if you drop in 3, you can re-roll a d20 roll. And if you hit 6, you have to roll a d4, and that's how many you have. So there's kind of a limit on them. And what I love about it, like, I'm a lazy game master. I love anything I don't have to do. So when players are fully responsible for that entire thing on their own, so much nicer than me having to worry about, like, when do I put inspiration out? Did they do something cool? But what about the quiet person who doesn't always, should they be getting it? Don't have to worry about it. And it's the first time in a decade where I've had players like, oh, I rolled a 4, but I get a luck point, right? And they were like, immediately they're the sad, when it has a little hook at the end of happiness, right? And I've literally had people who seemed happier about getting the luck point than missing the check. And that is an example of like this very modular system that I can grab and dropped into this game that isn't even using. I opened it up to Tales of the Valiant, but nobody grabbed onto a Tales of the Valiant character. They're like, no, I kind of like these. But that system dropped in. Doom Points is another one from Tales of the Valiant that I just adore. It has completely replaced legendary resistance for me. And now I use it all the time. And my players hated legendary resistance. And this is the first time they're like, I'm going to cast Banish on the big boss. And I'm like, you understand, he's got 5 Doom Points. I'm like, I know, but it's getting rid of one of them. And I'm like, great, like here's your, this is, so now they see it as something that a shield they're burning down, rather than they just like, oh, it's this thing I gotta, and there's no difference really, right? Like the answer is they're using it for the same thing.
I mean, not to tell a story about my character, but there was a point in Winter Fantasy where I had, the 1 legendary resistance on this god. And so I had to cast on him a command that he kneel. And he failed the roll, and I knew the DM was enough of a good role player to go, there's no way this god is kneeling to you. They have to use up their last legendary resistance on this totally stupid command spell.
Yeah, but it's rare, right? Like for me, it's always like, it's usually when I was working with players, playing with players, and they would cast something, and I would tell them, this is I would always tell them, this is a legendary foe you're facing. And they're like, well, I guess all these spells are out, right? And never even think about them. And this time is the first, because I can use Doom Points to do other things. So I'm like, oh, I literally had a dragon who used 2 in a round to recharge his breath weapon, move, and breathe on them again. And they hated that, right? But they were like, well, that's 2. He only had 5, and 2 of them are gone. So now we have more. And so I love Doom Points. So like, those are those examples of like modular pieces from all of these systems. Level Up Advanced 5e has the ration system. What's the ration system called? What's it called? Supply. So they have a great system for supply, right? Like, that's one of the nice things that Level Up Advanced 5e brought to the table that I don't feel like the other 5e books brought, which is a pretty tight exploration system and a pretty tight system for how you handle going through territory, making sure you have enough food, and not getting too bogged down in encumbrance and, all this kind of other stuff. And that's something that you can kind of just grab and bring in and drop into your game and run if it's there. And that kind of stuff is great. The interesting bit, though, are these little weird incompatibility bits, right? So like one of the things I think a lot about is like, what does compatibility mean and where does it kind of break down? And just to kind of start, I think like there's compatibility at different levels. And I think all of the people who have been talking about what compatibility means, all in their head have their definition of what it means. It's different than what other people mean. So some might mean you could take any old adventure, and you could take that old adventure and you could run that adventure and it would pretty much run straight, right? You could take a monster and you can move that monster and, from any one system, and that works. Those are generally compatible. You're probably not going to have to do a lot of work. Magic items, mostly true. Spells, mostly true. Spells is kind of a weird one. Classes, maybe. As long as the whole class comes with all of the stuff that it needs and it never touches any of the stuff from any of the other ones, that's probably okay. Subclasses is where things definitely break down, right? And I've talked to publishers. I don't know, is Lou Anders here? I was talking to Lou about this. So Lou's a producer who makes stuff for Tales of the Valiant. And when he was first working on Tales of the Valiant, it's like, why are you making it Tales of the Valiant specific and not making a more general 5e product, saying it's compatible with Tales of the Valiant? And he's like, I'm doing subclasses, and the way that they don't even call them subclasses in Tales of the Valiant. So, if I'm going to do that, I have to write it for that one thing. And it's because subclasses are handled. I mean, they're different between 2014 and 2024. They're definitely different between Level Up Advanced 5e and Tales of the Valiant, and all of the supplement. You've written, I don't know how many subclasses, right?
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of thought that has to come into, like, how do I take that subclass?
Right.
And if I'm going to apply it to a 2024 character, there's actually rules in 2024 to let you do stuff like that. But there are times where it's like, it's expecting that you have this thing for that class that no longer exists, right, as part of that class, and now it won't work anymore. So, and that's one where GMs are just going to have to noodle through it.
It's tough if you're a third party because you have this luck system and it goes back to the type of design you're talking about, like hit dice. Like you want to kind of have it over here, but then there's a subclass. And wouldn't it be great if it used it?
Yeah, sure, you want it.
But now you're referring to a thing that may not be being used in the game. It's one player, one of your fans will want you to make all this link together. So you get that sweet payoff of all these systems you've built, and others want it in total silos. And it just to me looking at even 5th edition, where things like, they'll describe a system and then they don't use it again. And I'm like, oh, what happened? Like, you're not really using downtime in your adventures.
Mm-hmm.
You're not really using, all this amazing stuff that's in Van Richten's that never shows up anywhere else. I mean, anywhere. And you're like, that was really cool design. And it's like, it's just there. Right?
Well, and I kind of like that to an extent, right? I sort of like I don't know if I like it in the core books, like Bastions, but I don't mind it if it's like, let's try. And I think Xanathars did a lot of this, right?
Yeah.
And that, Xanathars was like, let's put a bunch of different things out there and we'll see what kind of picks up, right? We'll see which ones are the components that get legs and run. And even if it's like, well, one group out of 100 uses it, you're like, okay, well, somebody got something from it, right? Like
rules in Saltmarsh, right? But like,
yeah, we got great ship rules in Saltmarsh.
James and Dragowski do all this work, and then it's like,
where were they in Spelljammer?
They make Spelljammer, and it vanishes, and you're like, that's where it actually could have paid off. Okay, all right.
I have lots of Spelljammer thoughts, but
Now I had nothing to do with it.
Do we want to take some questions from folks about this topic? Yeah, sure.
Two real quick, but I'll do
questions and thoughts. Right, we're all having a big conversation about all this. So feel free.
This is repeated history. The OSRs had to deal with this, and they discovered it by accident that a lot of the OSR games were broadly compatible with this version of D&D, and they all kind of realized it's BX, right? And even on a wider scale, Shadowdark, Morkborg, those others are kind of BX compatible in a broader sense as well, right? And so there's a lot of blogs out there. I think the one that puts a lot of blogs together, there's this whole section about how they came to terms with that and how they started designing towards that version of D&D.
Yeah, but just to pile on that, one of the interesting things that I discovered in this is I run a yearly Ravenloft game. I've got one coming up in a few weeks. And I've been running I've ran it with 3rd, 4th, 5th, and now I've switched to Shadowdark for it. And one of the things I found with Shadowdark is the stats are almost exactly the same. So I'm literally using the old i6 Ravenloft from 1986. And then it's like, oh, I have these Strahd zombies. It's pretty easy for me to whip up a Strahd zombie in Shadowdark. And the math is on the same level. And so that was a surprise to me, right? I was like, holy cow, like this brand new game that's just completely compatible. Right. Yeah.
It's just something
that's interesting. Yeah.
So I really wish for every edition of Dungeons and Dragons, they would have reprinted page 230 from the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons guide. And do you mind if I read it to you?
What was it? Is it the one about you have to keep a calendar or your game sucks?
What? That was 231.
Page 230 at the end, it says afterward, it is the spirit of the game, not the letter of the rules, which is important, never hold to the letter of the rules or allow some barracks room lawyer quotation from the rule books upon you.
I like that you're quoting the rule book now, by the way. Keep going, yeah.
This intent of the game, and then it kind of goes on.
Yeah.
But it's like,
I think that's pretty well embraced, though, right? I think, I don't have an example.
Embraced by a lot of people, but it's also, we refer to them as rule books, not guides.
Yeah.
We talk about what you can or can't do because we have now changed how Counterspell works. I've always tried at my table, and what's really weird is I've got a lot of min-maxers and optimizers and stuff, and I would think they would just abuse me for this, but I'm always like, if you want to play a wizard that's all focused on Arctic magic and stuff, you can take Fireball,
reskin it,
reskin it, and have it fit, right? That I want my players to be involved in the story of the game. I want them to be feeling creative, not necessarily tactical.
Yeah. The issue is that games are also machines. And we can say, we're going to build the best machine ever. And then your cogs and my gears do not fit. But my cogs are awesome, by golly. And your gears you think are the best. So, yes, the spirit needs to be there, but there also needs to be the balance. There needs to be some sort of metric system where we can build our cogs and gears to fit together perfectly to make this work.
It just seems like as the editions go on, and I love them all, but as the editions go on, it's like, well, in order to have organized gameplay, we have to have hardcore rules. And
the organized part of that is really interesting because I think that seems like the area where that really hits. And then most of the time outside of there, I have a pretty good feeling that most GMs are like, we're going to have to talk about this.
The reason is because you move from table to table.
Yeah, you have to have some consistency.
I had a great conversation with Rob Shinsu once in 4th edition, and I was like, hey, how do these two Warlock rods work that everybody's talking about? He's like, I don't know what you're talking about. Just make a ruling. I'm like, well... in organized play, it comes up all the time because you move from one table to one table and you get completely different rulings. And that's where it does matter what the rules say because it's that consistency of the experience. Yes, everybody can make a call, but why are we having to argue about what the basics of the class is anyway?
Yeah, no, I think it's an open question. Are role-playing games? And if they are games, what kind of games are they? I don't think they are actually games. Or if they are games, they're like, if I want to get nerdy, they're like non-Suitsian games and there's all this stuff, whatever. But basically, I think they are an activity. They can become games. Like, you can play a role-playing game as a game, where it's like, no, there are rigid rules. We're playing it like, if we're playing Settlers of Catan, like, the rules tell us what we can do. But you don't have to. In the same way that you can play baseball, like, you can, hey, it's an organized baseball game, like, we're keeping track of everything. Or you can just kind of play... we're just playing catch, or we're just kind of messing around in the backyard, and like we're still playing. Like we're definitely playing when we play RPGs, but it's not clear that we're playing a game, or at least that we're always playing a game. Where I think like that is this idea of it is this sort of consensual, like all of us are together agreeing that this is how it should work. But that's a very soft definition of how it should work.
Right.
Versus a much more deterministic, no, like this is how every interaction is mapped out. And it's either game master as facilitator versus game master as like rules execution, and I think that is a really interesting continuum of RPGs that you don't find in any other type of game.
Right.
And I think, so I think one of the things that we can get out of our conversation, one of the things I'd like to kind of give out to all of you to grab and run and go off with other GMs that you talk about is trying to embrace that idea that like, the GM is the arbiter of what happens at the table, and their goal is to make facilitate a fun session. So all of the messy bits, every GM has all of the, and it says in all the books, right? The GM has the ultimate authority to go and kind of mess with this stuff. But there are these areas where like people are like, I don't know. And I'm this way. It's like, I'm going to try the rules first. Like, it turns out, like, I remember when they first described advantage, right?
Yeah.
And like, I learned something about advantage that I hadn't even thought about till like you were on a podcast like 2 months ago, right? And I've been playing with it forever. But at first I was like, this is busted. Like, advantage is broken, right? Like, we had a +2 bonus forever. And now it's like a +3, +4, +5 equivalent. It's bananas. And the double, I was still burned on 4E and crits. Yeah. First time I met you, I complained about crits, right? In 4th edition. And the biggest one does. And it was like, this is doubling the chance for crits, right? Like, oh my God, it's going to be bananas. And then I'm like, wow, this is really good, right? Like, it turns out advantage is super fast and super easy. And one of the things that you brought up recently, which I hadn't thought of, was the idea that like it just ends all the conversations about any other bonus that you have and saves a ton of time.
That's like programming background.
Right. It's like the minute you have it, right. The minute you have it, you don't have to have any more arguments about other ways that you have advantage. Once you have it, we're done. You're not going to get anything better than that. So you just keep
It's
go.
efficient search algorithm.
Yeah. Let's jump to another. Yeah, sorry.
So I want to touch back to one of the previous comments about the OSR. I'm one of those weirdos who does both modern and older stuff. When you go back to BX, there are a couple people, one of whom I think is Bruce Hurd himself, and the other is a website named Rearc. And they seem to have really broken down the math on BX to where you can assemble a class, and if you give it all of the abilities of the elf racist class, and you run the numbers, it works. And it works across the board. So here, I'm asking this question to you guys because I'm looking at 4 guys who would be, in my opinion, among the very best to put this kind of a product together or to know if it already exists 4 or 5. Has somebody put out something that says, if you want to balance these subclasses against each other, here's how you would do that. That's my question.
I don't know a product that does that. And I think most of it is like reverse engineering the stuff that exists now, right? Going through like the kind of work you were doing of like looking at what exists, especially from the system reference documents that exist, taking that and can you break that down and can you start to figure out the math of like what exactly the kind of bonus is? I'm sure you've got a spreadsheet that has it.
Yeah, it's totally possible. It's just a matter of the trick to it is you would like so it's totally possible. There is a map that exists. The one tweak that you would have, like the advantage that BX has, is that you have spell casting or non-spell casting. You can have 2 tracks. You can kind of figure out, okay, here's my power. 5th edition has multiple. So if you were to, like, you have long rest, recharge, short rest, recharge, at will, blah, blah, all mixed up. So probably if you were to do something like that, you might just have like 2 tracks, like do you want to be a spellcaster or not? Because there is enough of a difference between how spellcasters go through power versus how non-spellcasters go through power. So there would have to be some tweaks there, but it's doable. Like I haven't, I thought about writing up some design guides that break stuff. Like now that 2024 is a year old, so you can kind of do a comprehensive look at it. But that app is there. It's just a matter of figuring out a way to surface it in a way that makes sense to other people.
I would buy that out.
And we've kind of done it with monsters, right? Like,
monsters.
Yeah.
Monsters are there, and even in the DNG 2014, right? You get those sort of point values for different abilities and things like that. This costs 2 CR. Whatever.
Why are you pimping the Dungeon Master, Kevin? You and I wrote a book. We're selling it downstairs.
Because of the next part of it, yeah.
Oh, okay. Never.
Please buy it now.
You get royalties on one of those two.
But the thing I was going to say is, for all that there is this sort of math background and it does exist, these games are all created by fallible humans and then also by Mike. To what extent was the high CR monster play tested to verify that this math actually follows the desired curve? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe not at all. To what extent, do people really look at these subclasses and whether they are actually all balanced against each other? They might not. And so when we design, one of the things we often find is, you try to find something that's reliable and go, okay, this seems to really work really well for a lot of people. I can sort of use this as a comparison benchmark. But when you try to translate it to math, it gets tricky, right? And trying to just say, this is worth X is a difficult.
On the player side in particular, you're talking? Or just anywhere?
Really any of it. But there's always that, there's a mathematical basis and then there's the reality of it. Unless your game is like 4th edition, right?
Yeah.
Then it can really say much more so that this is a mechanical advantage that we're doing. Or it's a utility power that can do these kinds of things. And that becomes easier to slot in and compare.
But the complaint you get is, hey, my fighter feels like my wizard.
Yeah.
Right. That's right. We could make the perfectly balanced game that no one would play.
Right.
Because it would be perfectly balanced.
Yeah. And any other question? Yeah.
From a business perspective, do you think 5e 2024 needed to exist? Or if they just kept putting out quality...
Do you have to tap out?
But also your insight. But or if the
some of us signed legal documents about this.
based on 2014? Would financially they be in the same spot?
I would say from a business, so I just didn't, but part is we have a year to look back and say, hey, like we didn't have everyone raise their hand. We said, oh, who's playing 2024 exclusively? It's not like everyone's hand went up. I'd put 10 grand on the table that if we could go back in time to 2015 and ask the same crowd who's playing 5th edition versus any other early edition, everyone's hand would have gone up. Like you saw rapid, massive adoption across the board. And whenever you're managing a platform shift, that's what you need. If you don't get that, it is incredibly difficult to claw people back. Like you get one bite at the apple, and if it doesn't go right, like you're stuck for like the next 3 or 4
Would you
years.
say that was pretty much the first time that's happened, though? Because I bet you that didn't happen in 4th edition.
Roughly speaking, it is similar to what happened with 2nd edition and with 3.5.
Yeah.
One of the things people don't think about 3.5 is when 3.0 launched, it had a really big audience. That audience kind of tailed off. When 3.5 released, it did a good job of capturing the people who were left, but it didn't bring back the people who had left before 3.5 came out. So I think that is kind of what you're seeing now, where like if you were already like really invested in buying everything, like, oh, I like, a D&D book comes out, I buy it. I think you were probably going to upgrade to 24, just because kind of staying relevant, staying up to date. But I think that is a much smaller portion of the audience today than it was, say, 3 years ago during the pandemic. And I think so to me, whenever you have the way I describe it to other people, is that it feels kind of like the PS3 if you're like into consoles, where it's like PS2 is a dominant console, huge, absolutely like one of the biggest consoles ever. The PS3 was like, well, it's better graphically, but it's got all this stuff like Blu-ray player attached to it, and it's more expensive, and it's really hard to develop for. So it doesn't mean like PlayStation is dead, because clearly PlayStation is now.
Then the 5,
yeah,
you couldn't keep them in stock for like 3 years. Yeah.
But you did see this thing where like, did everyone with a PS2 run up by a PS3? No, you saw a type of player for whom like, no, I love graphics. I love to me, that's what I'm really looking for. They hopped over, but a lot of other players looking for playability, especially online games, like we're going to Xbox 360 or just sticking with their PS2. And so I think that's kind of where they are now. And again, it reminds me of 2nd edition, where I think the same thing happened from 1st to 2nd. 2nd wasn't enough of an upgrade to get people to buy all the new books. And there were certain downgrades, like there's no demons and devils, which is like, okay, it's a minor thing. But if your campaign has demons and devils, and I'm still keeping that 1st edition monster manual like at hand, well, then why bother buying? Like, why make my life harder? I could just stick with AD&D 1st edition. And so I think that's kind of where, and I get, again, I was like 14 at the time when 2nd edition came out, but I think we would have seen a similar reaction in 1990 of like a lot of people saying, yeah, I might be using 2nd edition, but like I'm also mixing it with 1st. The number of people going exclusively to 2E was not enough. I mean, we saw obviously TSR went out of business effectively like 6 years later. I don't think it's that bad, but I do think it's like, I suspect that if like there are executives at Wizards of the Coast who are like pondering the fact that their audience has been split in half. And that's generally what I've heard from retailers and distributors is the audiences. There are now 2 audiences, the 2014 audience and the 2024 audience.
And it may not be a huge problem if future products can appeal to both, right? If you can buy that new starter set and running with your 2014 characters or the class boards that are in there or 2024, then maybe it doesn't matter, right? It's something that third parties have to worry about because, again, if you create that luck system, but then you start realizing that you only have this size of an audience and you'd like to appeal to these others, do you keep using this luck concept that only this group has? Do you try to create something new, but then your old fans are like, why am I not seeing you talk about this thing that it's a complicated question for everybody, not just for Wizards and for other RPGs as well. And what's funny is when another RPG does it, not a lot of people talk about it. Right, when they create their 0.5 version, we all
they just do it.
A lot of us like Cypher and Monte Cook Games, great company. They get to do it, and then they will relaunch Numenera, and you will not see an uproar about it in general. Right, outside of very pocket forum areas, but
I think D&D is this weird outlier where the rules do get rewritten to the point where like you notice it. Like if you play Call of Cthulhu, like I run 7th edition Call of Cthulhu with like 3rd edition adventures. And you don't even notice it. Like, it's literally like, well, I have to add luck points because that's in 7th edition, and my players can push rolls. But that's invisible to the actual stat block of, like, the weird slime monster they're dealing with because those numbers all just work. So,
I want to thank all of you for coming. I hope you enjoyed our talk.